Welcome to One Thought at a Time with Ian Travers, where we get curious about what makes us tick. I'm joined today with a man who's taken his own success and used it to help others. Welcome, Roger Cassidy.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. Bit of a backstory, I suppose, and it will become clear when you tell us what you do, but I was so fascinated by visiting the site of what you do now. So having built that anticipation up, please tell us, what do you do now?
Right, well, I'm the chair of trustees for a humanitarian aid charity called Aquabox, which is based in the Derbyshire Dales. And we, in simple form, we produce water filters and then donate them out to communities in the aftermath of natural and man-made disasters around the world.
And so give us the thing itself, the water filter is quite a design, isn't it? Tell us a bit more if you can, for people who are listening. Just try and put in their mind, what is it that describe the clever bit.
Right. Well, the water filter is a handheld ultrafiltration system, which, in simple terms, really is a case of forcing water through tiny holes in a filter membrane. And those holes are small enough to allow water to go through, but to prevent all waterborne diseases such as cholera, typhoid, dysentery, diarrhea. So it's a simple thing. Someone will just pick the machine up. They'll just start pumping the same way as you pump a bicycle pump. And then after a couple of minutes, you'll get clean, safe drinking water and actually be dispensed through it.
And the size as well. So there's two different sizes, isn't there? There's a smaller one and a larger one. Just give us a sense of the physical size of these.
Well, the family filter is about 18 inches, about half a metre tall, and then the larger sort of community filter is probably about a foot tall, but then is about maybe 9 inches by 9 inches, square.
And the name Aquabox as well. So you actually physically create a box. So tell us a bit about the idea behind it and what is this box?
Well, the box really comes from the original concept of Aquabox, which was really to respond to needs around the world. And that was not just providing safe drinking water, but also to provide items of shelter, items of hygiene, cooking utensils, sort of comfort items as well. And so all those items, which there used to be about sort of 50 or 60 of them, would go into a box, and then that would be sort of sealed up along with the AquaFilter, and then that would be dispatched to communities around the world in the aftermath of the big disasters.
And it's quite interesting. So I had an insight into that when, as part of my involvement with Explorer Scouts, we visited your facility, and they had the opportunity of trying to pack the box. Yeah. I mean, that is no mean feat. So give us a flavour of the type of equipment that goes into this box, which I guess I'm going to use my hands for people who are watching it on video, but who are listening. I suppose we're talking about half a metre?
It's about half a metre.
Half a metre wide by about 300 mil tall, about 400 mil wide. So it's a pick-upable box. So,
it is.
So what would a recipient of this find in that box?
Well, the first thing they'd get a couple of tarpaulins, which should be at the bottom, and then there'd be 2 buckets, and there'd be a couple of stock pots. There'd then be sort of bowls, plates, cups, which were all made of bamboo because we're trying to sort of use sustainable items. There would also be sort of some education items such as pens, paper, and small games as well the children can play with, and also tools for actually rebuilding homes as well. So there'd be hammers, nails, screwdrivers, sort of, and things like that. So it's really aimed at people who've either lost everything or they perhaps moved into a refugee camp where they've just got a basic tent to work on, so they can then begin to rebuild their lives.
I found it quite fascinating, the talk that your team there gave as well. It's a situation I think most people who will be listening to this podcast are in the fortunate position of never having to be displaced like the people that you help, and looking at that box from that point of view, somewhere to give your family shelter, create that fresh water that you're talking about. I was completely fascinated by it. So give us a sense of where have you sent boxes over the time that you've been in existence?
Well, we've sent them to something like about 26 different countries around the world.
Wow.
During that period, and that I guess it remains one of our biggest responses was after the tsunami in 2004.
Wow. Yeah.
Where we sent out to Sri Lanka, to Malaysia, to Thailand, all the countries which surrounded the epicenter of that big tsunami, and that remains I think we had people working round the clock to actually meet that demand, but bring it more up to date really. Over the last 18 months, much of our responses have been out to Ukraine in the aftermath of the what's going on over there at the moment, and also out to Turkey and Syria following the earthquakes which took place there. And then, but also in addition to that, there's been other things which have gone under the radar a little bit, like there was some very bad floods in Eastern Africa about 6 months ago now, so we sent quite a lot of aid out to Malawi as well. And one thing which for a long term we've supported, because it's something we feel very passionate about, is the terrible things which are happening in Yemen. And so we've actually, for the last 6 years, we've been sending out a couple of shipments of our aid packages out to Yemen during that period as well.
And a lot of the places that you're helping, they're just not reported in the popular media, are they? No. They as you say, they go under the radar.
Yeah.
Yeah. If people wanted to find out a bit more about what you do, how could they do that?
Well, we've got a website that we try to keep up to date. Really, that's www.aquabox.org. We've also got a fairly active Facebook page as well as Instagram, and so we do endeavour. But in addition to that, we're always happy to welcome people to our depot, which is between Wirksworth and Cromford, just on top of the hill in Derbyshire Dales as well.
In the most unexpected, unlikely place as well. I mean, this is the thing. I think that there's this a marvellous piece of work being done in the middle of a small town in Derbyshire.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You mentioned about people working around the clock as well. Tell us a little bit more about that, because this is largely run by volunteers, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
so tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, with the exception of one part-time depot manager who manages, the procurement of the items that we send out there, as well as the, managing the shifts in the warehouse, we've got something like about 70 volunteers that come to our depot each week to assemble the filters, to pack the boxes, and to carry out all the necessary logistics and warehousing duties, that are involved in sending out these dispatches out in the aftermath of the disasters.
And just going back to the filter, you mentioned about assembling the filter. That was the other thing that, again, I was quite surprised, impressed about as well. This isn't just this water pump that you just buy in. You actually assemble it.
We do. That's right. Yeah, the filters are made up of about sort of 40 or 45 separate component parts, and it's a 2-day process to assemble these filters. So you start off with a core membrane, which is where the ultrafiltration straw membranes are within, and then you're gluing tops and bottoms onto it. You're also putting the sort of pump on the side of it. You're then including brackets to be able to secure the whole thing together, and then it will get tested to make sure that it complies with WHO water standards, so that each and every one is has been fully tested, and so when it arrives at the the recipient that really needs to get that safe water, they can be assured that it's producing safe drinking water for them.
And how long does it last for?
Well, it's a good question, actually, because we've had, when we originally sort of developed the idea, which actually came from a concept from the originator of the idea up in the northeast, a chap called John Griffiths. He approached us and said, "Look, would you like to put this into your Aquaboxes?" And we said, "Yeah, looks great, really." And so we worked with him to miniaturize it so it could fit in the box. And then our thinking is that, okay, maybe these will last perhaps for 18 months, 2 years. But in reality, we've actually had some of these which have been, were put in as a test bed in Gambia, 8 or 9 years ago now, and they're still going now, which is amazing.
Because it's the filter. It's not a replaceable filter, is it?
It's
Because
not,
that's the picture I think many people have in their heads, but it's not.
That's right. No. So there's a secret for getting it to work is that there's a backflush mechanism. So every 24 hours, we in our instructions to the users, we'll ask them that they should actually do the backflush, which essentially is a way of sort of, sealing the inside of the filter, then pumping vigorously, putting clean water through it, and that will then force all the dirt and the muck which is held on the filter membranes. It will push it up to a top chamber, and then simply by opening another valve, it then gets expelled out, and it's clean and good and ready to go again.
It's amazing, absolutely amazing. So, how is it something that you are keen for people to get involved with?
Yes, it is. We're always keen to spread the word. I think we're probably one of these, another of these things which is probably a great secret which doesn't really spread out too much beyond the Derbyshire Dales area, really. And so we're always very keen for people to spread the word, for them to actually come and visit us, to find out what they can do, to raise funds, to allow us to continue the work that we're doing, because we rely completely on funds that come from supporters to keep the operation going.
And also, I guess, as well as that, as you say, it's volunteers to come along and physically assemble the filters and pack the boxes too.
Yes, that's right. We do have a plan that we're hoping to double our output over the next 12 months. We've been fortunate to get a number of local companies who've been working with us. They've supplied free of charge. They're manufacturing experts. And they've looked at our processes, looked at our operations, and are in the process of redesigning some of those at the moment, so that we're able to double that output. And invariably that will lead to a need to try and expand our workforce, to look at ways in which people can help us, or perhaps help us to raise money, to raise profile, to so generally expand the operation, really.
And if you're looking for people to sort of help in that point of view, what kind of skill set does someone need to have to come and help?
Well, the skills. Ironically, I think one of the a lot of our filter assemblers are ex-plumbers, actually.
Really?
Because we find that they've got, because a lot of it is about putting tubes together and about sort of doing this, that, and the other. But that's not the only things we do, because we're also packing the boxes.
Yes.
And so we give some sort of fairly basic training on how to fit all the items into the box.
Yes.
And to seal things off. But also we're looking for people to help with our logistics operations. A lot of the complexities of actually sending aid out to these countries is making sure you've got the logistics right, all the customs clearances in place, and so people with that kind of expertise as well.
Great.
As well as social media skills and that sort of thing to spread the word more. So it's
great.
So it's really there's a broad range of skills we're always looking for. So.
And if someone feels that they can help in some way, shape, or form, how would you like them to get in contact?
Well, I think probably through the website is probably the best way initially. But also just sending through a request, asking a question on Facebook as well would get through to the right people, and we'd also be able to sort of follow up that way as well. So
great stuff. And if anybody again wants to reach out to the organisation, if we receive any inquiries as well, we will pass them straight through to you as well. So, well, look, that's a great what you do now. So my inevitable question is going to be, how on earth did you end up doing that? How did you get there?
Well, it's interesting. I'd spent most of my professional life in the pharmaceutical industry, and that had taken me to a number of countries around the world. I did a lot of work in India and in China, as well as other countries in the Far East, and I'd seen with my own eyes really just how awful it is if people don't have access to safe drinking water. In those days, I was living in the southeast, working in London. And we moved up to Derbyshire, and I got involved with the local Rotary Club in Wirksworth, and it just turned out that they had been the original starters of Aquabox.
Okay.
And so I started off just by volunteering, just by packing the boxes, just like you did yourself, Ian.
Yes.
And but with a background in logistics and also and purchasing, I fairly soon felt, well, I can probably add more to the party, really.
Brilliant.
And so I fairly soon I then became a trustee and took on the responsibilities for managing those sort of areas, and then more recently was also looked after the treasury functions within the. And then 5 years ago I got asked to become chair of trustees.
Right.
And so ever since then I've been trying to hold the whole ship together and bring in the right skills and take the whole charity forward, really.
Brilliant. What was it, do you think, when you were travelling to those different countries? What try and most of us will never see what you probably saw. Just try and help us understand, what was it that you saw that you felt you needed to do something about?
Well, I think the things that really struck me was, I remember once going to driving through a very small village in eastern India, and there was a whole queue of people was sort of gathering around this single water pipe and this sort of thing, and it was mainly young children, and I said, well, what's happening? Why are all those children around there? And said, well, that is the water source for that village. And there were probably about 3,000 or 4,000 people in that village, and they had just this one, almost like just a hose coming off the hillside. Who knows how clean the water was, really? But it really struck in my mind that I thought, gosh, this is when we think we just take water for granted, really, and this is a life-giving thing, and these children are providing the means of keeping their whole families alive, really. I think that's what really hit me hard.
We are very fortunate, aren't we, really, in that respect?
Yeah.
What does it make you think when various water companies have been topical, haven't they, in the news over recent months and years, and we won't mention any of them, but when we see in our country it being messed with, what does that make you feel when you think about the work that you're doing to people who are really in difficulty?
Well, I think it really brings home how much we waste our water here, really. I think it's my father worked in the water industry for a lot of years, and he used to talk about it being our most precious but our most abused resource, really.
Wow.
And I think that applies even now, 40 years on from when he retired from the industry.
Yeah. Do you think even without coming and necessarily, if people don't feel they're in Derbyshire and don't feel they can come and directly help, is there anything that you think in general that we could all do to contribute to the cause?
Yes, there certainly is. We've got a network of ambassadors around the country. In fact, beyond the country, we've got them in Europe and in the North America as well. And those people, we encourage them to give talks on behalf of Aquabox, to perhaps attend shows and other events, really, and also perhaps take part in delivering their own podcasts or own communication means in their own countries or their own regions of the country, really. Just to try and raise awareness, and if it resonates with people and they feel they'd like to financially support or practically support us, then that's fantastic, and that's really how we will continue to grow, really.
Brilliant. So just switching back to yourself, so a career in pharmaceuticals. So how did you end up there? What were your drivers and influences that ended up you being in pharmaceuticals?
Well, I suppose I'd already always come from a scientific background. I mentioned my father was a water engineer, and so I studied environmental science at university, and thoroughly enjoyed that. And I think in a different environmental climate, I probably would have ended up working as an environmental scientist, but sadly in the early 80s there weren't too many openings around in that area. So I got involved more on the commercial and the accountancy and legal side of things, and trained as a chartered company secretary.
Okay.
And then through that, I then moved in and spent some time working in procurement and sort of central contracting, and I thoroughly enjoyed that, and it was great. And I got involved in offshore operations in the gas industry.
Right.
But then they wanted me to move back down to London again, having settled on the Lancashire coast. I was reluctant, and an opportunity came up to work for Glaxo up in in Ulverston, up in the South Lakes.
Okay.
And
lovely.
I thought, well, I've always loved walking and climbing, so I thought this ticks an awful lot of boxes.
Yeah, brilliant.
And so I started my role, working as a purchasing manager in there, and then gradually moved around to, travelled all over the world, around the UK and Singapore and India, China, just working my way up through the organisation to become one of the outsourcing directors with them, and then but then retired quite young, and so was able to do things like this.
It's brilliant. I'm curious, with all that, that the travelling and the work that you did, what was it about those roles that you enjoyed?
I've always loved travel. And I think, and meeting new people, I used to find, I first started travelling out to India and China, before mobile phones, before, ready access to, jet planes and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I would, if I was going out to China, I'd fly out to what was Hong Kong, a British territory in those days, and would then sort of, pick up my visa to go into China. Yeah. And then I would, phone my wife from the hotel room, said I'm going in now. and I would take a flight in. I would go and carry out my business for probably for 3 or 4 days. Yeah. She wouldn't hear anything from me. Wow. And then hopefully I would then coincide my return back with the next return flight back to Hong Kong and come home. And I found that very exciting. It was going to visit collective farms, to look at much of the starting materials for pharmaceutical products are vegetable products. Okay. Things that come, say, from the sisal plant and things like that. Right. And so I would have, part of my responsibility would be to oversee the crop growing of those sisal plants and make sure they were being well looked after. Right. And so I'd be dealing with the collective farms in those areas. And then through that, I'd then put deals together. And then we would then sort of start getting those starting materials, which we could then make the products that are used for asthma and other sort of diseases in the Western world.
That's fascinating. Mm. On your travels as well, do you have is there a favourite place? Is there a place which really you have or would like to return to?
Well, I think places like Singapore and Hong Kong do actually sort of switch out. I'm obviously pretty bit nervous about going to Hong Kong these days, but Singapore, I spent a number of months there, and I always found it a very exciting place to visit, and a place that seems to be able to reinvent itself every 10 years or so. So it's probably very different to what it was when I was last there 15 years ago. So
it's interesting. I've visited Singapore a few times, and I must admit I do enjoy it for many of the reasons you've described there. And it also feels, for such a busy place, it feels very safe. Probably the right word. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is very much that way. But also, when you go around little corners, you can find a little bit of Little India, or a bit of some of the original Chinese communities. So it's certainly made an effort to actually preserve a bit of the old Singapore as well as the ultra modern as well. So
I think the one thing that is probably what's the name of the fruit which is illegal to take in a taxi?
The durian.
The durian.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an acquired taste, isn't it?
It's pretty. Yeah, you have to hold your nose when you eat it, don't you?
Yes, yes. It's one of those things where people often say, don't they? You should try things twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get to a second.
No. I think I've only tried it once as well. So.
Brilliant. Look, that's great. Thank you for that so far. And I'm going to start bringing it to a close. I've got a couple of questions which I'd like to finish on. One is a question we ask every guest, and I just wonder. Let's assume we can conquer time travel, and you could write the younger you a letter for you to find and read. What do you think, knowing what you know now, what do you think you would write to yourself?
Well, I think I would tell myself to work harder at university and at school for a start. I think I probably was rather... But I think a lot of it is... one of the things I've learned most is to try and enjoy what you do, really. And I've you can't always do what you enjoy, but if you enjoy what you do, I've always no matter where I've gone, whether I've been sort of sent to sort of northern Finland or the far reaches of South America or elsewhere, I've always felt that this is an opportunity and I should make the most of it, really. And no matter how tired I am, I always, when I landed in a new place, I'd always make the effort to go out, to explore the area, to see what's happening. Sometimes gets you into trouble. I think I did walk around a bits of Oakland and just across the bay from San Francisco. I was told, God, you must be mad walking around there. There's more murders here than anywhere else. But I survived, and I found those things very, very enlightening. And so it's really very much live as much as you can and make the most of every opportunity that comes to you, really.
Brilliant. That's great. In this second season of the podcast as well, we've been asking previous guests to leave a question for subsequent guests. So here we have a question which has been left for you to answer. What is one fear you have which you are not currently attempting to overcome?
Oh, gosh.
What's one fear you've got which you're not attempting to overcome?
That's a very difficult one, actually. What's a fear I'm not doing? I suppose in some ways I'm probably, I'll be 65 at my next birthday. And I suppose one of the fears I'm not trying to overcome is perhaps, maybe I've not been planning as much as I should have done, for the future, really. One hears terrible things about, people hanging on and, life not being great. And to me, quality of life is so much more important than longevity of life, really.
Brilliant.
And so a fear I feel I should be confronting is, how will I manage, what could be another 30 years of life, if I live as long as my mother, and, what will I do to actually ensure that I get the most out of that? And, if I'm not, how will I address that?
That's great. Oh, well, maybe we can talk about that in a subsequent podcast if we come and talk to you down at the unit. Roger, that's been brilliant. I will then ask you. You now get the pleasure of leaving a question for someone else to answer. What would you like someone else to answer? Do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of people in the world who don't really sort of enjoy all the comforts and all the well-being that we have over here. Really, I know there are people suffering here, but it's nothing like one sees out in some of the countries we respond to. And I would like to ask people, say, what are they doing to try and sort of sacrifice some of the things they're doing to actually make life better for people in areas where less fortunate than themselves, really. So.
What a great question. I look forward to the answer to that with a subsequent guest. Roger, thank you ever so much for taking the time to come on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure to have the conversation with you. So that has been One Thought at a Time with our guest this time, Roger Cassidy. If you have been, thanks for listening.